It's the library.
What?
Maybe sitting somewhere else on the line of fire.
I'm joining without video. Nothing's happening yet.
So again, for those of you who are just joining, we're waiting for people to come in some more, and you're welcome to, I've muted you all, so you won't be able to say anything for a while. But I'll go ahead and explain how it's going to roll out in just a few minutes, okay?
Good boy. There's your mouth.
Ooh, look.
Where'd my thing go?
Oh, there's Gemma. Hello. Gemma.
Yay!
Okay, Gemma, I'm going to mute you.
Typing into
Hey.
Oh, there's Rosalie. Oh, she's gotten big. My word. Hi, Rosalie. That's great. Oh, yeah, there's Tyler. Hi. Oh, the mustache is new.
Well, since you saw it.
Yep.
Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and start. My name is Boyd Pratt. I'm the Adult Programs Associate, and that means that I have the real pleasure to do programs like this. This evening is going to be the Know Your Islanders talk by my older brother, Thane Pratt, and it's going to be about his trek through New Guinea, and particularly in terms of the birds there. I want to say right off the bat that this is being recorded, so just so you're aware of that, and we'll be able to have the recording on up in the internet so that you'll be able to actually look at that later. I muted all of you except for Thane and myself and Floyd Bourne, who's the other co-host with the library. And we'll basically have a procedure where we have Thane's presentation, and what that will be is that I will turn it over to him and he will be doing a PowerPoint. And what I recommend is that you, as you watch it, you put it into speaker mode. So if you take your mouse or whatever your device and go in the upper right, you'll see a thing that says speaker view. And that will, you click on that, and so you'll just be able to see Thane or see his little square, and then you'll actually be able to see his PowerPoint as the main image on your screen. There are a couple other things that I wanted to point out to you. For those of you not familiar with Zoom, if you hover over the bottom part of your screen, you'll see various things there. And one of them is called participants. So if you want to see who else is going on, who is attending this, you can click on participants and it will give you a column on the right-hand side that will talk about, give all the people there. And it will actually show you that. By means of that, if you hover over your actual listing as a participant, you have several options. And one of those options is to raise your hand, virtually raise your hand. And that means that you will get my attention as to be able to ask questions and things like that. The other way you can ask questions is by doing the chat, which should be in the area below the participant list. So you can actually write a question there for Thane, and we'll go to that and we'll actually try to cover those questions at the end of his presentation itself. I imagine that Thane will talk for about an hour or so, and then we'll have the Q&A for about a half an hour. So anyway, I'm just really delighted that Thane can do this. I just give a little personal note here. Obviously, I've known Thane as an islander, both in the Hawaiian Islands and on San Juan Island for all my life. And what I've always really admired about Thane is that he always had a purpose. He loved birds, and that was clear from the get-go. Ever since I've known him, he's loved birds. And, you know, as opposed to I'm kind of envious of that because, you know, I just kind of, you know, go back and fluff life, basically. But Thane's really gotten a dedicated purpose. And he, after attending high school in Hawaii, went to Colby College in Maine. And at the end of that, he got what's called a Watson Traveling Fellowship. And that got him to New Guinea. And Thane can correct me on his history here, but that got him to New Guinea and his first encounter with New Guinea birds, which was really quite extraordinary. And it really kind of built a lifetime associated with that. So this is a presentation on one of his many trips to New Guinea. And I think it's just kind of really fun. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Thane. I'll have Thane introduce himself and launch into the program. And Thane, if you want to go down to the share screen and
okay. All right, here we go. And right, so do I hit share again, or?
You should hit share screen and then pick your presentation.
Okay, all right. Okay, here. Okay, see, can everyone hear me? Lloyd, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, can everyone else hear me?
Let's assume they can.
Okay, all right. All right, well, thank you all very much for coming. I should say straight off that this is my first time doing a Zoom presentation, so hopefully we'll Zoom through it successfully. And but there may be, you know, a pause here and there just to get the technology right. I want to thank you all very much for coming, and I want to thank Boyd too for setting up this opportunity for me to speak. I know some of you who have signed up for the talk, and others I would have loved to be there to meet for the first time. this is something that I was really looking forward to, and I'm, unfortunately, owing to the pandemic, we have to do it this way. But I look forward to meeting you in person another time on San Juan Island. Besides me meeting you, I was hoping that you would meet me, and particularly get a chance to see Boyd and me together. And the reason that I say this is that there have been times on San Juan Island where I find that I'm being stared at by someone, and it's puzzled me until one time somebody came up to me and said, "Boyd." And it's happened to me a couple times now, and it's always a question. It's not Boyd, it's Boyd. And I realize that it's people mistaking me for Boyd. So we do look something alike. I'm a few months older and more wrinkled than he is, and a bit shorter. But apart from that, we do look quite a bit alike. Boyd's and my interests, as Boyd said, are quite different. Boyd has very broad interests in the humanities and all sorts of things. And my interests are primarily in natural history. I would say that if you look at either one of us and you're not sure, what you should do is look for the binoculars, all right? And if if the person is wearing binoculars, chances are it's me. So anyway, this is a picture of me and Boyd here in Canada, ages 11 and 12, when we were still very young. Now, I have it on good faith from my family that although Boyd does have very broad interests, he does have one, those broad interests do include one book on birds. And it's this particular book right here. It's the Field Guide to Little Known and Seldom Seen Birds of North America. And I want to say straight off that, if there, just in case there are any fact checkers from Twitter out there, that there is nothing in this book that is factually correct. This is a well-used book. You can see the coffee stains right there. And so let's take a look at a couple of the birds, several of the birds that are in this book. The one on the cover here is you probably guessed it already, it's the military warbler. And it's a fairly old bird. It's already got 3 stripes on its tail. This one is the long-range target duck. And I should tell you that I am an islander of sorts. My wife and I recently bought a property 4 years ago out at Egg Lake, where our neighbors are the Faroes and the Halls. I do a lot of bird watching out there, and particularly for waterfowl. And I scan the skies for ducks looking for this particular one, the long-range target duck. And I've yet to see it, but there's always, that possibility. So, okay, on to the next species. This is our next species here is the blunt-billed woodpecker. And in the language of bird watchers, this is called a range-restricted species. It has very specialized habits. It feeds, it forages for insects on petrified wood in the petrified forest of Arizona. And it wasn't long ago that my wife and I, Linda, were there looking for this particular woodpecker. And we failed to find it. This is a picture here of Linda looking at one. We were told that one was here just the day before, but no luck for us. So Boyd and I last year did a bro trip down to Texas. We too looked for the woodpecker, but I think we're just gonna have to save this bird for another trip. Okay, so the last bird in this book is one that I like to draw special attention to, and it's called the night-flying teeter. And the book says, it's a night bird, it says, to date, this new species is known only from a single roadkill specimen, and there it is. Completely nocturnal, this bird is surely evolved to blend in with the night. And the only way we can see it is that here it's got holding in its beak a firefly that's illuminated its face. So I'm surely such a bird, this sounds pretty ridiculous, but I think we're going to get back to this one later on in the show. All right, well, you came to see real birds, and this is a presentation I did on a trip that I did to Papua New Guinea it's a hike across the Kokoda range on the Kokoda track. It was a month. I'm going to read a little bit here. I've just got some facts I want to make sure I don't miss. So I'm going to read from my notes here. It was a survey biological survey along the Kokoda track in 2014. It was a joint expedition with the Bishop Museum of Honolulu, Papua New Guinea National Museum, and the PNG Department of Environment and Conservation. So I'd like you to join me to relive this adventure, to experience some of the wonders of New Guinea, particularly the bird life. But before we lace up our boots and put on our backpacks, I'd first like to answer the question, why New Guinea? My experiences in New Guinea began straight out of college during a year of independent study program as a Watson Fellow. During my time in what was to become Papua New Guinea, I met another young American bird enthusiast, Bruce Beeler, and we later went on to write and publish the first field guide to birds of New Guinea. Okay, well let's get oriented here. First of all, where is New Guinea? When before I went to New Guinea, I knew very little about it. I imagined maybe it's the size of Cuba, maybe. I knew it wasn't in the Caribbean. And in fact, it is a very big island. It's the second largest island in the world, second after Greenland. And as we know, Greenland's all covered with ice. There's not too many birds there. New Guinea is north of Australia. It's about 1,300 miles long. That's the distance from where you're sitting in San Juan County all the way down to about the middle of the Baja Peninsula. So it's a long, long ways. It's equivalent to, say, Washington, D.C. to Denver, or from London to Moscow. It's a big distance. The island itself is about twice the size of California. And it's what's called a continental island. Now here's a picture that shows the way that New Guinea and Australia look now, where they sit in the Pacific next to Asia. And on the right is a picture, a map, showing the way this area looked about 12,000 years ago during the height of the ice ages. At this time, sea level was much lower, and you can see, that New Guinea was attached to Australia at that time. And in fact, the seas between New Guinea and Australia now are so shallow that you could see bottom, when the water is clear, all the way from Australia to New Guinea. So New Guinea is really just a part of Australia. I like to think of it that way, just as Java and Sumatra and Borneo are part of Asia. And we'll get back to this particular theme later in the talk. This way of thinking about this part of the world was the first person who drew attention to it was a man named Alfred Russel Wallace, who, with Charles Darwin, was a co-thinker and discoverer of the theory of evolution through natural selection. He was also a great biogeographer, and he spent 5 years touring this area, and he noticed that the bird and animal life to the east of this particular line was very, very different from the birds and animals to the west of the line. So these islands, these Western East Indian islands, are very different from New Guinea and Australia in the terms of the kinds of birds and animals. So what kind of animals are we talking about? Well, over here in Asia, things familiar to you, monkeys, tigers, deer. If you cross Wallace's line, there aren't any of those things. You got kangaroos and possums mainly. All right. New Guinea is part of Australia, but it's really quite different. It's much wetter than Australia. It's tropical. It's covered with tropical rainforest. It is now currently the largest existing block of rainforest left in the Eastern Hemisphere, compared to Asia. It's much wetter than Australia. Australia has a little bit of rainforest along the coast here, but it's a lot drier. New Guinea is mountainous. The mountains there go up to 15,000 feet. There are still a few glaciers left in the mountains up there. It's one way to think of New Guinea is that it's sort of the Amazon and the Andes of this part of the world. It's quite continental in its scope. New Guinea is also important because it's the last refuge for a lot of the tropical plants and animals that once lived in Australia. And back tens of millions of years ago, Australia was much wetter. It was covered in rainforest. And, but it's now, of course, a lot drier. And these plants and animals that used to live in Australia now live there in New Guinea. New Guinea is a great habitat for bird because of all that forest, which birds like. There are about the same number of kinds of birds in New Guinea as there are in Australia. So that's about 621 kinds of birds that live and breed in New Guinea. And of those, about 365 are what we call endemic. They're only found in New Guinea. If you've read any books of Jared Diamond about people, he once quipped that Australia can be considered an offshore island of New Guinea in terms of its bird fauna. Okay, so that's a lot of birds, and New Guinea is really a destination for bird watchers, for that reason. All right, so one thing I want to get clear up straight away is that people often call the island Papua New Guinea, and that is incorrect. The island is New Guinea, and the Papua New Guinea is this country here. It's the eastern part of island of New Guinea, and it includes the islands of New Britain and Solomon Island. Indonesian Papua is the other half of the island, and it is part of the country of Indonesia. The fact that that province is called Papua, and then you have Papua New Guinea, gets very confusing. So people get confused about Papua. So we'll just call the island New Guinea. All right, so when we go to Papua New Guinea, where we're going is to Port Moresby, the capital. And it's on the southeast coast here. The Kokoda track is a track that goes pretty much from the hinterland of Port Moresby across the ranges and down to the north side. You can hike in either direction. You can go from south to north, but we did it from north to south. It's kind of a fine scale map. It's a little hard to get the picture here, but you see there's a mountain range you have to cross. This little inset here indicates which parts are really steep in red. And you see most of it's really red. I don't know that I could do this again. This is a 2014 one, and I did the hike, but it really wears you out. Most people do it in eight or so days. We did it in 28 days because we were doing this survey, so it wasn't as rough on us. So the reason the track is there is that during World War II, the Japanese invaded the north coast of New Guinea. And this was in preparation for advancing down to the south coast, taking the entire island, and then being a threat to Australia. From July to November in 1942, the Japanese attempted to push their way over the mountains, but they were stopped and ultimately pushed back by the Australians, along the Kokoda track. The Australians were outnumbered 2-1, and there were 625 Australian casualties. I couldn't find figures as to how many New Guinean casualties there were, or Japanese casualties. The New Guinean population, local New Guinea population, did a lot to help sustain the troops and to get them in and out and to get them supplies. As I mentioned, the Kokoda track has since become a popular hiking track, especially to Australians. There are about 3,500 visitors who hike the track every year, and they're assisted by an even larger number of Papua New Guineans. All right, so here we are just about to start our trip. We're in Port Moresby, and this is all our luggage. It's not all our food, however. So to introduce everybody, that's me. This fellow's name is David. He's with the National Museum. This is Sabi Koke. He's a Hungarian artist that painted a number of the bird pictures for our book. Oliver Talawan is a young Brit, worked on reptiles, along with Alan Allison, an old friend of mine, who is a herpetologist. And then finally, Bulisa Iova, who's a vertebrate biologist at the National Museum. So this is our crew. So I mentioned, I think Boyd mentioned that I published a book on birds of New Guinea. This is the first edition, and it went out of print in when was it? Well, a while ago. And so when it went out of print, the press came to us and said they wanted it. They either wanted it updated or entirely new book. So we went with an entirely new book, and this was it. The book, at the time we went on the Kokoda track, the book was about to be submitted to press, and so this was a chance for me to try out the book, and for Sabi to see more New Guinea birds. So here's Sabi. Sabi worked really hard on the trip. He did a lot of painting. It's just what he does, and he's very good with a telescope and with digiscoping. In other words, taking a camera, attaching it to the scope, and being able to get pictures. And wherever he went and painted, he drew large crowds. And these kids are watching him here. They're very happy in this picture. I'll show you a picture later, and they're a bit more somber. They've been scolded by their elders to not bother him. Before we left Port Moresby, we stopped at the Port Moresby Zoo, so Sabi could do a little bit of test painting, and we get to see some birds we wouldn't see on the Kokoda track. I wanted to show you this picture of a cassowary. This is one of New Guinea's most prominent birds. It's related to ostriches and emus. They weigh about large female. The females are larger than males. Large female weighs about 120, 125 pounds. They're very powerful birds. You can see they look kind of like dinosaurs. I don't know. There's something that about them that makes you think dinosaur when you see them. They have these very big, powerful feet, including a dagger-like claw on their inner nail that's several inches long. This just shows the bird close up. They, as dangerous looking as they are, and dangerous actually as they are, they feed mostly on fruit, which they collect from the forest floor. You see them at zoos. In zoos, that's really where they're dangerous. They're very territorial and possessive. I actually don't think it's a very nice picture. He shouldn't have been in there doing this. The bird's attacking him. And if he didn't have that board there, it could put him in the hospital. Okay, so we flew from Port Moresby to a town called Papua on Air New Guinea. And this is our transport. And this, I bet you said never seen an airport shuttle that looked quite like this. It's got some deer antlers on the front here and this lovely pony on the hood. We loaded all our stuff up on the back, and we were driven to the start of the trail where we spent the night, and then the following morning divided up all our supplies, our food and this kind of thing, into packs to be picked up by porters and taken with us. So this was a long and chaotic process, and it wasn't helped by the fact that along the way up to our first stop, quite a few of the food parcels wandered off, and so we were short of food during our trip. So here we are at the beginning of the Kokoda track, all lined up and ready to go. And so here's the start. And so I did a lot of walking with Alan. Alan and I are good friends. We first met in 1973, and we made perfect traveling companions. Alan has just this encyclopedic knowledge of New Guinea and things New Guinean, and he loves to talk. So, and I don't like to talk, so it's great. So we walk and he talks and I listen, and we have we have a good time, and we also find stuff along the way. It's sort of definitely a mutual thing. So the first village we stopped at, they brought out this little animal for us to see, and it's about the size of a cat, and it's a kind of possum, and there are many kinds of possums in New Guinea. This one is called a cuscus, and they live up in the treetops and feed on fruit. They're nocturnal animals, and they have these large bulging eyes to help them see in the dark. So the villagers will sometimes keep these for a while. They usually end up in the dinner pot sooner or later. So along the way, we stopped at we'd stop at streams to cool our feet, and we'd see some of New Guinea's beautiful butterflies. This is a type of swallowtail. After a couple hours hiking on the lowland flats, we got into the foothills. Immediately started to see some birds. And I wanted to show you this picture because this is often how you see birds in New Guinea. They're way up in the treetops. Often on a slope, the tree canopy will actually be in front of you because the tree trunk is down below you and with a steep slope. So this is a kind of fruit pigeon. It's called a pink-spotted fruit pigeon. And here's another fruit dove. Honestly, this is the worst picture of a bird I will show you. And I do it deliberately because it shows really how difficult birds are to see. I don't know if you can see the bird. It's literally in plain sight. There's no foliage in front of it. It's right in the middle of the picture. And if I can get my pointer here. So there it is. And this is the dwarf fruit dove. It's a little bit larger than a sparrow. And it's in here to feed on these fruits. So this is what it really looks like. And this is a painting by Sabi of different kinds of fruit doves in New Guinea. And this is the little dwarf fruit dove. So there it is again. New Guinea has many kinds of pigeons. It also has I believe that the dwarf fruit dove is the smallest pigeon in the world. It's not as close to. Certainly the largest ones are these crown pigeons. They're quite a bit bigger than a chicken, a little bit smaller than a turkey. And they have these amazing crests. They live on the forest floor where they pick up seeds and fruits. Instead of just cooing like a pigeon, they make a sound that sounds like a drumbeat, and it sounds like a heart. It's a boom, 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 boom. Quite an amazing bird. They're very shy, mostly. Those, of course, people interested in eating them. Here's another kind of pigeon. This is an imperial pigeon. They're about twice the size of the common street pigeon that you'd see down at the harbor. And they too feed on fruit. They're really quite lovely. We tend to think of pigeons in somber colors, but this one's got this beautiful bottle green back and this lovely head, pearl gray head, and an ornamental sort of knob on its bill. And dark red eyes. I don't know if you can see that. It's quite amazing. Two, there's these beautiful little ground doves. This one's sitting on a nest in some ferns. And like I say, there are many kinds of pigeons in New Guinea. The ones in the middle here are all fruit doves, an imperial pigeon, and a greater cuckoo dove. There are more than 50 species of pigeons in New Guinea, lots and lots of them. And they are a bird that's really characteristic of New Guinea and Australia and South America. Pigeons have almost no fossil record at all for the Northern Hemisphere. And it seems that they've arrived in the North only fairly recently, having come from the Southern Hemisphere. Okay, so we moved from the hills up into the mountains. We climbed 3,000 feet the first day. It was really completely worn out by the time we got up there. We arrived in camp in the pouring rain. They immediately put up this tent and lit a fire and cooked our dinner. Where we were staying is at a place called Isurava, which is a village, and they have guest houses where the hikers can stay. You're supposed to bring your own food. We were somewhat short on food because it had walked off, and so we bought food from the villagers. And this is okay if they've got food to sell, but there are no grocery stores, so they grow all their own food. These are the tents that we slept in under the tarp. And so they cooked dinner for us one night. So a bunch of local foods. These are kind of green, sort of squash greens and sweet potatoes, sweet potatoes, yams, corn on the cob, fried bananas, this sort of thing. This is an eel somebody caught in the stream, and so we cooked that up and ate it too. The forest around at 3,000 feet in New Guinea is really just wonderful. It's a very human-friendly environment. Lowlands are hot and sticky. Up in the mountains, it's just a bit cooler. It's warm during the day and cool in the evening. It's surrounded by forest of many kinds of trees, but predominantly oak trees, oddly enough. One of the trees that was near camp was blooming at the time, and produced these red flowers that were highly attractive to birds. This is in the trees in the citrus family. And so Sabi parked himself on the edge of the clearing with his telescope, and he photographed and painted birds. And this is a kind of parrot called a lorikeet. There are numerous species of lories and lorikeets in New Guinea, and they feed on flowers. Here's another one, rainbow lorikeet. To feed on flowers, they have this amazing tongue, and inside that bright red beak is a tongue that is sort of like a basting brush, and they can open it and expand it. And if you have a pet lorikeet, you have to watch out for your ears, because they love sticking their tongue in your ear and they'll rototill it. And believe me, it's just the strangest sensation. So anyway, these birds are coming to the flowers to feed on nectar. So this is this little bird here is called it's kind of honey eater. It's called a red-colored Myzomla, beautiful thing, and it has a small cousin. This is one of the smallest birds in New Guinea, called the elfin Myzomla, and you can see here's a flower beetle right next to it. It's not that much larger than the beetle. So Sabi, like I say, would paint the birds, and he'd draw an audience, and these are one of his paintings. He would do these field sketches. He wouldn't complete them. He would just do them just to try and capture the ambiance and the birds' postures. We colored Myzomla again. So there are numerous species of songbirds. We've talked about pigeons. We've talked parrots. There's a lot of species of parrots in New Guinea. There's a total of 43 species of parrots. But by far the largest group of birds are songbirds. And this is a little bird that lived in the, like perching on dead branches above the forest canopy. It's called a peltops. And they have this bill for catching bugs in mid-flight. And they have a white patch on the side of their head. They also have one on the back of their head. So they have two white cheek patches and then one patch like this. And I think they have these so that the hawks of whatever predators might be around can't tell where they're looking. So can you guess which direction this bird is looking? Okay, well, it's looking towards the camera. You see its bill there, and it's got those are the two cheek patches. So Sabi painted this one too. Another kind of songbird that we had around camp was a bird called a pitahui, and this bird became famous some years back because it was discovered that it was poisonous. And the fellow who found out that it was poisonous, well, the locals know it's poisonous, but the visiting scientist didn't know that. And he found out about it because he was catching birds in nets, and he took the bird out, put a numbered leg bag on it and released it. And any of you that know a field biologist personally may know that they are not really reliably toilet trained. And so anyway, Jack did not wash his hands before eating his sandwich after handling the bird. And so he ate his sandwich, and his lips went numb. So that got him thinking, well, could this possibly have come from the bird? So he got talking to the locals about it, and they said, oh yeah, no, you cannot eat this bird. And so he actually started a research project on it. And he found out that the way that they get to be poisonous is that they're not born poisonous. They get the poison by eating a specific kind of beetle. And this is a soft-winged flower beetle. And they eat these beetles. They're able to digest them even though the beetle is poisonous. And they transfer the toxins from the beetle into their, I believe it's into their oil glands, and then spread it around their feathers. And there are other kinds of birds that do this, but the remarkable thing, I think, is that this is the very same beetle that is eaten by the arrow poison frogs in South America. And you've probably seen on shows on BBC of these very colorful frogs hopping around the forest floor of South America. And the indigenous people there will rub the beetles on their on the frogs, the frog skin on their arrows, and use those to shoot monkeys, which poisons the monkey and it falls out of the tree. So I thought that was really interesting. It's same insect, two very different animals using the poison to protect themselves. All right, so I'd like to say a little bit more about songbirds. And this is not a songbird, but what is a songbird? So this is a songbird. And the next several slides are somewhat difficult for me to present, so I'll take it slowly here. I thought when I made this slide, well, what bird should I use to show people songbirds? So I thought, well, here's a picture from the first field guide that I ever had. It's a bird that's familiar to all of you on San Juan County. It's a white-crowned sparrow, and it shows a lot of the features that songbirds have. They have a sort of a short body. They have these long legs for perching on branches, and they generally hop around a bit, and they do a lot of singing. And so in essence, they're just sort of, little dicky birds, but they're just a huge number of families of them. Let's see. So just to finish up with this slide. So then it occurred to me too that, just to try and, blasted pointer here. It occurred to me that, for the birders in the audience, you'll recognize this too, particularly the baby boomers. This might have been your first field guide, and it certainly was mine. This was Roger Torrey Peterson's Field Guide to Western Birds. It was a second edition, which came out in 1961. And here are Boyd and I in 1961. And I took a second look at this picture, and I just couldn't believe my eyes. But if you see clutched down in this child's hand is a copy of this book. It's so this I remember buying this book in Vancouver just before as we took the train into the Rockies. All right, so songbirds. About half the world's birds are songbirds. There's more than 5,000 species of them, and all these species are classified or assigned to a family, and there are 100. I think I can't see here. I think 138 families maybe. I show you this picture, this graph. It's a little confusing to look at, and we're going to look at it in a couple different ways. For the first thing to get from it is that there are all these great many number of kinds of families, and there are many kinds of songbirds. It's also a family tree of the songbirds. So if you look down at the bottom, these are the earliest branches off the family tree, the oldest branches in a sense. And they date back maybe 40 or 50 million years. And as you go up the tree, you get younger and younger branches until you get to the crown of the tree. And this is where most of the families are. They're really diverse. And they're only ordered 30 to 20 million years old is when this great radiation took place. All right, so what kind of birds do we have here? I thought to make this a bit easier for you guys, I'd mark which families of birds are found in San Juan County. So we'll walk through them. Now, the gold stars belong to families in the crown of the tree, the youngest branch, the youngest part of the tree. And so we have here bush tits, larks, chickadees, swallows, starlings. Oh, something happened. tree creepers, nuthatches, wrens, thrushes, kinglets, waxwings, warblers, sparrows, blackbirds, pipits, finches, and last of all is the house sparrow, after which this entire group is named. These are called Passerida, and this is a passer, it's the Latin name for a sparrow. So nearly all the birds in San Juan County belong to this one crown group, this youngest group. But there are a few that don't. This green star indicates the flycatchers in San Juan County. They're a group called Sabosines that are mainly based in South America with a few families in Africa and Asia that are thought to have come from South America. Another group is are these red stars, and this is a group that it's called Corvida, named after the crow, Corvus, and they include shrikes, crows, and vireos. Okay, so if all our San Juan birds, and San Juan County is pretty typical in North America, so if all the, nearly all the San Juan birds belong to this crown group here, the Passerida, and I should tell you the Passerida is also heavily represented in Asia and Africa, then where on earth do all these birds live? Now remember, these are the early branches off the family tree for the songbirds. Well, let's start at the very bottom, and here's a little bird called the rifleman, and he belongs to New Zealand. They're only found in New Zealand. It's a family of little riflemen that found in New Zealand. Next branch of these Sabosines, they're almost entirely South American, with a few families in Asia and Africa. Next is this branch here. If there are any Aussies in the audience, they'll see some familiar birds from their backyard growing up. Fairy wrens, lyrebirds, honey eaters, and so forth. The next branch up, another old branch, a huge branch. These are, again, mostly Australian New Guinea birds. How about this branch here, another old branch? These two are mostly Australian, New Guinea, New Zealand birds with a few birds in Africa. So basically, I think you get the picture that all the old branches are mainly found in the southern continents. And it's thought that that is where the songbirds arrive, particularly the group of birds that led to this crown on the tree. So the crowning glory of the tree, the songbirds that we all know and love. And it's thought that they were derived from birds that originally came from Australia and New Guinea. And we'll get to that in the next slide. So anyway, this is the last difficult slide, and the rest of it should be easy from here. So I want to talk a little bit about the history of Earth, and you probably know that at the end of the age of the dinosaurs, an asteroid hit the Earth, and it wiped out all the dinosaurs. Well, it nearly wiped out all the birds, and the birds had to sort of reboot. There are only very few species that survived, and from them, all of the 10,000 birds in the world that we have now were derived over a period of 60 million years. All right, well, 60 million years ago is when that crash happened. And at that time, Australia was in a very different place from where it is today. Australia now is very far from Antarctica, but back then, it had just split off from Antarctica, and there was this little passage of water between it and Antarctica. At that time, the Earth was very warm. We worry about the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere now, but back then it was many times the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and the Earth was really hot. And down at the ends of the Earth, there was tropical rainforest and lots of life that we don't have now. All right, well, over the course of 60 million years, Australia moved north, and as it did so, the plate that it was on, it's called the Indo-Australian plate or the Pacific plate, smashed into the Asian plate. And in the process, it was just, I think of it as like a gigantic bulldozer or a snowplow. It pushed up all this sea floor and created a bunch of islands. And that was including the islands in New Guinea, and then all the East Indian Islands were formed at that time. And it's thought that Australia was sort of like a Noah's Ark of birds, particularly songbirds, and that the songbirds were carried along by the Australian continent and New Guinea. And when they bumped up against Asia, these islands formed, and the birds used these islands as stepping stones to get to Asia. So that's fairly a long story of how it all happened. Once they got to Asia, that wonderful crown of the tree that we saw earlier with all those bird families, that's probably all descended from a single species of bird. They got to Asia and just went bonkers. And from there, spread to Africa, spread to North America, and then back down to Australia. And some of those families actually went back to Australia. So it's quite an amazing story. And this story has unfolded only in the last 30 years. And people thought the history of birds was very different back when I began as a wildlife biologist. All right, so New Guinea has many, many kinds of songbirds. And the most famous family is this group here, the birds of paradise. And they're called songbirds, although their songs are lousy. They're lousy singers, but they are extremely beautiful. We'll hear one of their songs later in the show. There are a great many species, 37 of them altogether. The males are brilliantly colored. The previous slide showed only males. And this slide shows the males and the females together. So here's a rifle bird and his female, 12-eyed bird of paradise and his female. But the bird that we saw on the Kokoda track was the magnificent bird of paradise. And there's his female. And so let's go see if we can find one. And we were told when we got to Isarava that they had these birds there. And we were taken to a place where the birds display. Now each male magnificent bird of paradise displays only in one place, his own special place. And he does so at the edge of the forest. And he'll clear away the leaves on the forest floor, such as you see here. And there it is. And he's going to display on these upright perches. And he guards this jealously and keeps it very clean. To watch the bird, we built a hide or a blind of palm leaves, and Sabi set up his scope. And there's Sabi doing a selfie in his hide. So the first day or two, you just sort of wait for hours, and other birds will come by. This is a little white-faced robin sort of peeked in the window. And oops, what's this? Oh, okay, it's a mouse warbler. So not our bird. And then the next day, here it is. Magnificent bird of paradise, and it's on the perch, and it's quite wary. But they do calm down over a short period of time, and it comes in closer for a look. Quite a brilliant thing. I should tell you that these parts of it are iridescent green. It's very hard to photograph these birds because the iridescence just doesn't show in the dim light, but these glowing oranges and yellows do. Oops, there it goes. So here's the bird in all its glory. It has these are actually tail feathers that come out. And here it is. You can see the tail wires better in this picture. The bird fastidiously cleans its cord every day. Here it is removing a large philodendron leaf. Females and young males come in to check out the court. You can't tell them apart. The young males look identical to the females, and this is subterfuge because they want to sort of see what's going on. And so the male displays like this. He stands on the upright perch and faces the sky, so the light will illuminate. It's hard to see. This looks black, but it's actually this beautiful iridescent green. All right, so now this isn't the BBC and David Attenborough, but I'm going to try and show you a short video clip of the bird displaying. Try. So Sabi took this through his telescope with a little power shot camera. So there's the female above, and it's checking him out. Well, we think it's a female. And the male's displaying. Whoop, nope, no good. So he chases the bird off. It's probably a young male. It seemed like it had a fairly large bill, and he rejected it. So, and there he goes. Let's see, maybe I'll just play that one more time just because it's a short clip. You can see it. Okay. It's amazing what you can do with a little point and shoot camera. Okay, so Sabi also did some watercolors of this bird. This is the way it looks in life. It has this beautiful green color on its breast. From Isurava, we headed up into the ranges, and we crossed some streams. It's just incredibly beautiful. I don't know if you can see this suspension bridge here and one of the native houses. These suspension bridges were quite amazing, and they bounce around quite a bit, but they're really secure. They're made of tree saplings and rattan. You know, same rattan that your rattan furniture might be made of. Makes great rope. And that's Sabi crossing the stream. There's a raging torrent below. Some of these bridges I didn't like at all. This one was just a few trees strung together with rattan, and then this was the rope to hold it and hold you as you came across. Living in these streams was a bird called the torrent lark. It's a beautiful little black and white bird that fed on caddisfly larvae and other things that lived in the stream. The New Guinea villages are typically on ridges. It's cooler, more breezy here. They can kind of see what's going on. So, back in the old days, it would have been much better for defense. Folks here were pretty warlike. The disadvantage is you had to bring water from the creek down below. They've got their gardens around there. You see bananas growing, fields of sweet potatoes and other things. Along the track, we found remains of the old munitions from the war. There's bombs of different sorts, an old battery. The streams attracted beautiful butterflies. This one's related to the cabbage butterflies that are found in people's gardens, sulfurid. These ones feed, the larvae feed on mistletoes. And there are many species of them, and they all look a bit different. It's very, very colorful. They come down to the streams to drink water and get minerals. Some remarkable trees. This is called a pandanus with these stilt roots. This is the flower. The flower is taller than the sky here. It's just huge. It's like something from Avatar. It's just remarkable. And this is the tree. The planks of the trees are used for building houses, and the leaves are for thatching. Here's some of the huts we stayed at the highest elevation camp. Camp was about 6,000 feet, and it goes, the pass is at about 7,000 feet. And it rained the entire time we were here. You can see the thatching made from the pandanus leaves. Some of the birds included this Belford's Melodectes honeyeater. This is a different kind of pandan that it's feeding on, the flower. We got to see some more parrots. This is a pygmy parrot. It's no bigger than your thumb. It's this tiny little bird. And unlike other parrots, these guys behave like nuthatches. They run up and down the trunks of trees, and they're feeding not for bugs so much as for lichen. They feed on lichen and fungi, and then also seeds of figs and other things that get stuck in the bark. So male on the bottom. And there they are again. They're so cute. They're impossible to keep in captivity, or at least they were until recently. I think somebody told me that they've gotten some kind of formula that you can feed them. Sabi's main interest was birds of paradise, and this is a brown sicklebill in the gloom. It wasn't great weather for photographing, but here's a picture just to show you what the bird looks like. Brown sicklebill, there's the female. To display, they morph into this weird shape and turn sideways. This is the bird's breast, and there's its tail, and these flanks, lavender flanks here, come up over its head to form this kind of shield. Very strange. So Sabi painted this bird, and I want you to look carefully at this picture. Try and memorize it for a minute, because we're going to see the photo from which it was taken, and I'm going to play you the bird's song. Okay, so I want to tell you that when the Australian soldiers heard the song of this bird, they were terrified. And you're probably wondering why, but I'll show you. So the bird is right here, and we're going to see it in just a minute. So there's his face. Okay, so that was it. It sounds like a machine gun. It's no song at all. But quite an amazing thing. Let's see, I'll play it one more time. It's a fairly short clip. Find it. Okay. Oh, I see we're running a little low on time here, so I think what I might do is maybe talk about highlights, a few highlights here, and then close out the show. One of the groups of birds that really interested me are this group of birds called owlet nightjars, and they're very strange little birds. They're very old. They're about 50 million years old. They're kind of like living fossils. They're the ancestors of swifts and hummingbirds. There are 10 species altogether, and their homeland is New Guinea. Now, we talked about the night flying teeter earlier on in the field guide of improbable birds, and the fact that they are represented by one single specimen. Well, there are birds that are just like this. Okay, so here's the specimen, and this specimen was collected by a local fellow who just caught it by hand, and it wasn't until very recently that the living bird was found again and photographed, and there it is. There are a number of these guys. This is probably the last New Guinea bird ever to be photographed. So another kind of owlet nightjar. And I got a chance to get into the act and visited a remote part of New Guinea where 2 specimens of this bird have been found. And we were able to record its voice and catch another specimen. So we now know more about it in life. This is the starry owlet nightjar. Okay, as we continue hiking along the track, say one of the orchids that you'll see local folks collect them in their from fallen trees and plant them around their houses. This is Brigade Hill, one of the decisive turning points in the trail for the soldiers. It's oak forest, and we saw here a bird I'd always wanted to see. It's a kind of bowerbird, and the bowerbirds build these amazing structures in which to for the males to show off to the females. And this is the one that we wanted to see. This is another type of bowerbird. We found those guys, but no active courts. And here's the streaked bowerbird's bower, and it's just the most amazing thing. It's sort of a hut-like structure, and this is a tunnel that goes around a pole and comes out the other side. And the bird decorates it, and all these lovely blue pieces are actually shotgun shells, I hate to tell you, and pieces of fruit. I was just totally blown away. The bird's sense of aesthetics is incredible. It clustered these particular seeds in this one place, and then right at the center of the display, it put 3 star-like flowers. Just amazing. So this is just sort of like a constellation inside. So the bird calls from there. The female comes down and checks it out. And what he does is he runs in behind and hides so she can check it out without being scared by him. And they actually don't mate in here. They go off into the forest. And all right, so that was the, at this point, Sabi left us. And here's our group, including some of the porters. Sabi continued on his way down, photographed these, some more typical bird of paradise. This is the national emblem of New Guinea, Regiana bird paradise. So anyway, here's the conclusion to our trip. The end of the Kokoda track. I lost about 7 pounds on this trip. So Sabi, after the trip, Sabi went and he took his field sketches and he entered them in a show and he won a prize. He also painted the brown sicklebill, and here it is. And just so look at this picture here. There's the picture, And there's the show, and you'll recognize this fellow as the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip. So people often ask me, how does Sabi paint birds that he's never seen before? And this is how. Photos are taken of specimens at a museum. Photos are taken off the web to get the bird's postures. Sabi then sketches them out. And then there's a step that I don't quite understand that involves pasting this to a window. And then from there, he sketches it onto another piece of paper and then paints over it. And so this is the final product. But the painting is a lot more complicated than you would think. Here's the sketch before it gets put on the window. And then from there, he actually adds layers, so that he actually paints by layers. Quite amazing. All right, so that's the end of my show there. So I think I stop sharing, maybe. So Boyd, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Thane. I really appreciate it. And
Sure.
at this point, I thought we just kind of open it up to questions. And if you have if you have your video on, you can literally just wave your hand at me, or you can do the virtual hand on the right-hand side, and hopefully I'll catch that and unmute you to ask the questions. So. And I don't see anybody. Am I not seeing it? You must have given all the answers, Thane.
I guess. Is it time for extra features, or or do they want to see the cuts, the rejected cuts, or what?
I do see John there. So John, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, I missed the first 10 minutes of it, so maybe you'd mentioned this already, but how long ago were you there?
Yeah, this trip was in 2014. So it was about 6 years ago. Yeah.
And how many times have you been there?
Oh, I haven't added them up. I started out living there for about 4 years, and then I made repeated trips back there. So since the Kokoda track trip, I was there. I've been there once before, and that was last year over to the Indonesian side. Yeah, so it's pretty, for folks interested in visiting, it's a pretty rough place. I should tell you that. And you don't want to go on your own. You definitely want to take a tour, or if you're lucky enough to know somebody who lives there, then try and team up with them and have them host you. But security is an issue there, and there's also just the logistics are often difficult. It's a remarkable place. It's just amazing. It kind of gets into your skin. There are hundreds of languages, something like 800 languages in New Guinea alone. So it's quite something.
So Thane, I'm going to call on Val Veers here.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Val.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Hello? Super. Thane, I know almost nothing about Papua New Guinea, but I have in my head that the people in those villages you visited really hadn't, the West had not known about them until World War II, when as Australians flew across the top. And prior to that, all the knowledge had come from trading down at the shores. And I'm wondering if the character, quality of the birds and so on could be a function of the fact that the West hasn't been in there for more than 50 years.
Yeah, I think that's very true. New Guinea was really known from the coast for the longest period of time. When Alfred Russel Wallace writes that when he was there in the mid 1800s, when he was standing there writing his notes, he was probably the only white person, the only outside visitor to New Guinea on the island at that time. It's really quite remarkable to think. the people there are very at that time were very territorial and fierce, and they just didn't tolerate a lot of outside visitors except for a certain amount of trading and a certain amount of collecting of particular goods. And among those goods were bird of paradise plumes. So a lot of birds of paradise were known for what are called trade skins. These are skins that traveled thousands of miles through various trade routes and ended up in museums in Europe. There's a fascinating book. It's called Plumes from Paradise, I believe it is. And it talks about the trade. The trade was based out of a tiny island in Indonesia, just off of the Celebes. The island is called Ternate. And it was here, it was the only place in the world at the time where cloves were grown. Now cloves have been traded to the West for thousands of years. And so this is kind of where the trade route began. Well, they also traded in the opposite direction, going towards New Guinea. And what they brought from New Guinea was birds of paradise plumes, which they traded to the Vietnamese of all people, and a long time ago. And they would trade these metal drums that they would that the Vietnamese made. They would take to New Guinea. It was just the most bizarre thing. The Sultan of Ternate was fabulously wealthy, and he had an army that controlled all the islands in his region, all the way from the Celebes to, so it's off the Moluccas, Ternate is off the Moluccas. So it was off the Moluccas all the way through the Celebes to Borneo, and that's as far west as he got, and then as far east as he got was to New Guinea. So there's this huge area, and it was all controlled out of this one tiny area of Indonesia. It's really, really very fascinating. The sort of Portuguese took over the trade, and then the Indonesians. The Dutch. My history is not so good. It's the sort of thing that you read like 20, 30 years ago, and you forget along the way. But it went something like that.
So at this point, I'm going to ask Lisa. I'm going to ask you to unmute, and she has her hand up.
Hi, thanks so much for your talk. And
Yeah, hi, Lisa.
Hi, I'm curious, since you spent time in Papua New Guinea in the 70s, and then this trip was in 2014, I think.
Yes.
What changes you notice between the 70s and that last trip? And or maybe no changes.
Yeah.
But what things were you remarked on in that last trip, in terms of maybe the birds, or in terms of culturally? And then also, I'm curious with the Kokoda Trail. I know that it was developed as a kind of an eco trail and a way to support the local communities and the villages, as well as introduce people to the birds, the wildlife, and so on. And do you feel like it's working?
Okay. Okay. So as you know, to answer your question about the changes, yes, there's a lot of changes, and it's it's hard to know where to begin. First of all, the population has doubled since I was there, but the country has modernized a great deal. Economy has changed a lot. There's now a great deal of mining in various places, which both good and bad. It brings in a lot of money. And it tends to be concentrated in certain geographic areas, and the whole country isn't affected. There's been some logging, but like I say, there's still large tracts of forest left. The people certainly have changed. People inherently want to modernize, and they want to be part of they want their lives to improve as they see it. And so, yeah, also when I was there, it was a protectorate of Australia, and had very much a territorial feel about it. I mean, when we went to the movies, you would stand up, when they played "God Save the Queen" before the movie started, and so forth. But now it's its own country, and it's got a lot going for it, but it's also got a lot of problems. It's just a big mixed bag. to answer your question about the Kokoda track, back when I was there, Kokoda track was nothing. I mean, it was a track that maybe locals used occasionally. And, but since then it's been, like you say, it's been developed as an kind of an ecotourism, it's for adventure tourism. The main theme is Australians' contribution to the war effort, and this for them was a major theater in the war, and so it started out by older generation of Australians wanting to bring their families to see the track, maybe hike it, and a lot of those, nearly all those folks have died out now, and so it's but like I say, there's about 3,500 people that hike it. Not so much for birding, although there have been some birders that have gone down the trail, and I hear from people from time to time that have done that.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure enough.
So are there any other questions, or? I thought, Thane, you might end by talking to one of your numerous claims to fame, but getting on the equivalent of the cover of the Rolling Stone, and that is on the auk, and I will introduce this by saying that Thane actually had a species of nightjar, if I believe, named after him. And so,
No,
Thane, maybe you could
no,
explain.
not right. Okay, no, I'll take it from there. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so this back around the year 2000, somebody brought me this very strange owlet nightjar, and we tried to figure out what it was, which involved borrowing specimens from museums all over the world. We figured out what it was, which was just a dwarf form of another kind of owlet nightjar. But in the process, that revealed the starry owlet nightjar that I showed you the picture of, that bright sort of fawn orange colored bird with the two little horns over its horn-like feathers over its eyes. And so we wrote that up and published it, and it was published in the journal Auk. And at the time, Boyd's kids were quite young, and they were trying to understand all this. And so that's what Boyd explained to them. Well, it's just sort of like getting on the cover of the Rolling Stones magazine, so for birds. So that's what it was. But no, and I don't have anything named after me. That would be fun. But so that's no longer. All right.
Lisa, I still see your hand up, but did you have another question, or is that just residual? Well, I'll take it. Yeah. Okay. And I have Susanna asking a question.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank
Hi,
you.
Suzanne.
Yeah. Well, hello. Thank you. Thank you for introducing us to such a wide variety of birds. That was very fascinating. I had a few questions. One of mine was if you could talk a little bit more on your experience interacting with the people of Papua New Guinea, but also how has, in your experience, globalization and humans impacted the bird populations? And that kind of comes from when you were talking about the bowerbirds actually using ammunition shells.
Right.
Decorators, or also the feather trade as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, so when I started in New Guinea, it was still at a time when two worlds were coming together. So the outside world, with the Australians being the main players, and then the New Guinea world, which is exceedingly diverse. Okay, I mentioned the 800 languages. It really is just incredible. Anyway, New Guineans are remarkable in many ways, but certainly one of them is with languages. And every New Guinea person speaks multiple languages. Okay, so they speak their own language of their village. They probably speak a language from a few villages over. From the border of their language domain. They would, if they're educated, they speak English, and then they speak one or more of what are called lingua franca languages, which are one of those New Guinea pigeon. And then there's another one which is based on a Polynesian language called Motu, which is a very old lingua franca pigeon that was there before Europeans ever got there. So, you know, the New Guineans have had to be on sort of the fast track to meet the modern world. And they certainly have done so in many ways. And I had to live with them when I went to villages and was out in the field. I had New Guinean assistants. I learned to speak Pidgin. It is quite interesting. I mean, there's these sort of incongruities, I guess you would say. One of the more remote places I went to was an island called Wassel Island, which is in the far east. And I remember being there, and oh man, that's it's just a long way from anywhere. And it's not like the people are backwards or anything. They've all got transistor radios and they wear Western clothes and so forth. But they're otherwise they're just totally dependent on their own food growing and house building and pretty much for medicine and teaching and schooling and all. And it was very interesting. They would have, like I said, they had transistor radios, and you'd sit and listen. And I remember getting into at that point when the Bush elections was about to start, and they had political views. And it's interesting to talk to somebody from another country, way far away from the world that you're familiar with, and to hear them. They're sort of up to date in this is their window to the world, and they're very up to date in many things that way. And then as to how the bird world is changing, certainly with more people, that's more cutting of the forest. There's been some logging, mainly in the lowlands, but it's not nearly as badly logged as Asia. And there are very large tracts of forest. Surprisingly, there are very few birds that are on the IUCN watch list. Very few birds from New Guinea and that are actually New Guinea birds. Oddly enough, the birds of paradise are not among them. They're sort of like pheasants in the sense that the males are beautiful. Sorry, not supposed to happen. Sorry.
Okay.
Ruby.
Oh, sorry. See, I can't talk to you guys right now. Yeah, hi, Tex and Ruby. I can't talk to you now.
Okay. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Love you.
Yeah, I love you too. Bye-bye. Okay. So.
We got him.
Okay.
Hey, we're on the internet with you, Thane.
Okay. All right. I see that. I'm going to go back to Boyd here. Boyd, can you?
I just muted them, so yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. So. Yeah, I think the world is sort of finding New Guinea and New Guinea birds. There's now a lot more ecotourism than there used to be. A lot of birders go to New Guinea, and they're guides, both local guides and guides from overseas that come to New Guinea to show people the birds. And I think that that's a very positive development, because it means that they have to show the birds in areas where the birds are tame and they're not hunted. And so they tend to work with local landowners to have the birds protected in those areas and to build hides and that kind of thing. So you can go to areas and see the birds without them, flying away from you. Okay.
But Susanna, does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, that definitely answered my question. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Great. Are there other questions, or? Oh, I see, Kathleen, you have your hand up.
Yes. I wondered, Thane, if you ever got over to New Britain and the birds over there are similar to the mainland.
Okay, I think I got some of that. I couldn't hear clearly, but so the question was, are the birds in New Britain similar to the ones in New Guinea? Is that right?
Yeah. Did you get over to New Britain?
Oh, did I get over to New Britain? No, I never did. No,
Okay.
just mainland New Guinea. And the birds there, they do have some birds in common. The birds of New Britain and New Ireland, those islands, are in an evolutionary sense derived from New Guinea birds. So their ancestors came over from New Guinea and evolved into species that are now found only in New Britain. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, but New Britain's got some neat birds. It's actually a very pretty interesting place.
I have some pictures that I would like help identifying.
Oh, sure. Send them along to me. Boyd will send you my email, and just send them along, and I'll give it a go. I've got some field guides in New Britain birds. I'd certainly be able to tell you whether it's a pigeon or a parrot. But from those books, I could probably narrow it down. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
So I see Tina lifting her hand.
Yeah, sorry, it took me a while to see that. So I was just wondering why the birds in that sort of area are so from such an old tree. It's when you were describing where they came from. That they're all down the bottom of that tree that you showed.
Right. So there is a part of the picture that is unknown, and that is sort of how the ancestral a songbird. Why did it come from Australia and New Guinea? Certainly back at the time that it existed, Australia and Antarctica and South America were very close, if not connected. So the birds could go back and forth quite easily, and but how that original ancestor got down there, whether it survived the meteor impact there and then just sort of lived on to make songbirds, or whether its ancestor came from the northern continents, is unknown. Songbirds are derived, without getting too technical here, they're derived from a group of birds called zygodactylids, which are related to parrots. So imagine a songbird, imagine a starling with feet like a budgie, okay? And that's sort of what the ancestral zygodactylid looked like. And there are fossil zygodactylids known from both North America and from Europe. Unfortunately, there are very few old fossil birds from Australia. There is an old passerine fossil that was discovered not so long ago. That dates back to the Eocene. So it's, I think, somewhere in the 40 to 50 million year range, which is far older than any songbird that is known from the northern, any fossil songbird known from the northern continents.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I think maybe one more. Kathleen, I see your hand still up. Did you have another question? Okay, never mind. Okay, thank you, Thane. Well, actually, John's raising his hand. I'm gonna ask. There you. Can you unmute, John?
Yeah. Thank you, Thane. Two questions. One, I didn't catch what kind of work you were doing down there. And two, can you share what it was like growing up with Boyd as a brother?
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. I went down to study birds mainly, to do wildlife biology work down there. And I produced a field guide to birds in New Guinea. And Sabi was the artist, all those lovely paintings. We had two artists. The first one was John Anderton, who did the majority of the plates, and then he left the project, and Sabi stayed on, and so Sabi was working on it. So what was it like growing up with Boyd? Well, Boyd was a really nice guy, probably a lot nicer than I deserve, and he was certainly very, very patient with my interests, and there was the two of us, and so we were quite close then, I think. Yeah.
I will add that we came here summers starting in about early 60s, and back then San Juan was very much like Lopez. It was very open and sparsely populated, and we went to a lot of places. I mean, we were not hesitant about going onto private property and exploring all sorts of environments. So it was a real open island, and we often went to the labs for lectures. We just show up as kids, and that was okay. And it was really fun.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
Thane,
that
thank you
was-
so much. I really appreciate.
Thank you.
your-
Okay, well, thanks. This has been a great opportunity, and I really look forward to meeting those of you who I have met before.
Great. And yeah, and if you guys have any questions or things like that, I do have Thane's email, and then as I said before, this has been recorded. So if you want to watch it again or share it with your friends, I'll send you the link. So, Thane, thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and thank you. Okay.